Welcome back. It is time for The Way It Is, where we're looking at the big stories that have been dominating news headlines. And joining me in studio for this discussion this morning is Ambrose Weda, who's a lawyer. Next to him is Ogla Karani. She's a treasurer at the ODM. Ngunjiri Wambogo is a political commentator. And we also have with us Dr. Paul Nyangasi, who's a political consultant for the Coalition of Reforms and Democracy. Gentlemen, lady, thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin with the war on graft. And let's start off from the 29-point deal that was announced by State House. White House as well had it on its website, and this is following President Obama's visit to the country. And there are several talks that, of course, they had with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and during his public pronouncements, he talked a lot about corruption and how there needs to be concerted efforts on this. Ngunjiri, I'll begin with you. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through some of that, but it touches on intelligence sharing, money laundering issues, but of course also commitment from the government, promising that if there seems to be commitment, then there could be grants from the U.S. coming into Kenya. So your thoughts on this deal?
First and foremost, I think it's a step in the right direction for several reasons. The kind of graft that we are facing, the kind of graft, one of the things that actually Obama admitted is that the kind of graft that Kenya is going through is not unique to Kenya. Graft is something that happens in a lot of the countries around the world. Right. And some countries that are older, and America is certainly much older than us, have moved through various stages of the kind of fight that we are having now, and have gained some experience on how to deal with certain things. For example, laws. You fight with graft using the law, and so you need to have a certain structure of laws to be able to combat graft efficiently and effectively. And I am personally convinced that part of the structure of laws that we have in this country is not very efficient in fighting graft. That's why we actually have never gotten a conviction for anybody on corruption.
So for you, it's the laws, it's not the people behind these laws.
It's the laws. But then again, another admission that even Obama made is that corruption is a societal problem. It is actually, you see, in Kenya we have this thing of blaming only one side of the corruption when saying that public officers are corrupt. But public officers are never corrupt by themselves. We have a societal problem. It takes two to tango. So if we are going to deal with the whole element of corruption, the reason about the law is that you need to be able to deal with both the corruptor and the corruptee.
Okay.
That's the only way you're going to get to the bottom of this thing.
Dr. Nyangasi, does this inspire confidence in you that going forward Kenya's anti-graft war perhaps will be better placed to gain some results?
First of all, I think it's a misnomer to call it an anti-graft war, because none of that exists. I know our friends here in Jubilee took a lot of validation from Obama's visit, and they used it now they're making the arguments right now that about corruption, that it's a legitimate issue. But I think the bigger concern is that there's a progressive removal of the institutional capacity surrounding corruption. Corruption is just not a cultural problem. Corruption has a lot to do with the structure of the state and the institutions that surround the state. Now, the reason this is important is we have seen a progressive breakdown of, for instance, the hounding out of the ethics and anti-corruption chairman and vice chair, the underfunding of the director of public prosecution's office, even every oversight body that exists. And I think based on their actions, we cannot believe their words when they say that.
But it is your members that lauded the president in his initial list annexed to his speech, State of the Nation address, saying that this is a good step. And in many interviews after that, it's then later on that, we are seeing a lot of people coming out to criticize the same. So in your opinion, there's nothing good that's happening.
It's important to remember that nobody invited the president to make a speech. He, out of his own initiative, decided that he's going to go to Parliament and he's going to start a war against the graft. He set the timeline. Nobody insisted that he set the timeline, and he did set the timeline, and he said 2 months. Yet 4 months later, because he gave the speech in March 26th, there's very little that has happened. There are no jail times that have been issued. There are no prosecutions. There are no indictments.
There are people charged in court, cabinet secretaries.
We've had 2 cabinet secretaries charged with very light.
Wow.
Very light
so there's something that you want to happen, particularly and specifically.
Out of a list of, I think, 100, if I'm not wrong, 100 people that he brought to Parliament. I mean, If it was a success rate, it's less than 2%.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear from Ogla, because first, and I'll take you back before we come to the EACC. We'll talk about the bill, but in terms of the U.S. now coming in to support Kenya on this, saying, you know what, you can learn from Kenya in terms of best practice and all that. Do you think that will help?
The international community has been in the process of helping the developing nations from time immemorial. The U.S. has not started helping Kenya today. It has always been helping. It's been funding lots of projects. So this particular pronunciation by Obama was nothing new. But in relation to the
Have there been deals and agreements to fight graft between the U.S. and Kenya before?
I was coming there. In relation to fighting graft, I feel the Americans did what they needed to do. But I am certain, beyond reasonable doubt, that there is no single spirit within the Kenya government to fight graft. So even if we were given billions and billions of dollars and pounds, there is no one here willing to fight graft. The Jubilee government or any other subsequent government in Kenya has never had the strength. One of the things I love, to be very sincere, is that we cannot just say it's the Jubilee government that is refusing to fight graft. All the successive governments have never put any effort to fight corruption in Kenya. So for me, getting funds from America, from UK, from wherever, is neither here or there.
It's not just funds they're getting, it's in terms of just capability support, asking that the Kenyan government join certain organizations that will help in terms of sharing of information. But it says something interesting that I want to follow up on, that no government has shown that kind of commitment to graft. CORD seeks to be the next government to take over. What examples are you showing now in as far as there are members in CORD that have been implicated in graft? We have not seen your principals come out vocally on these individuals that have to step aside or for action to be taken against them. It's only for those in government. So is this war just political when it comes to CORD?
No, that's not true. When the president announced the list in parliament, I remember very clearly that our own party leader, Raila Amolo Odinga, was out of the country. And when he landed, he did not reach town. He made a press statement somewhere in Mombasa Road, along this road. And he said, first of all, of course, he agreed with many of us that he did not believe there was any commitment to fighting graft. But he said, let everybody carry their cross. And he said, let the government go a step ahead and let us see the government arresting people. We are not talking about taking people to court and in the evening they sleep in their houses, Ngunjiri or TNA. We want to see people behind in prison, in committee or in whichever prison. Then we know that there was any seriousness.
Is it the government that then becomes judge, jury? Are there their system? So is it just one individual or one aspect in this war?
Can I tell you something? Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but I will tell you something. If you do your case properly, you will achieve conviction.
Okay.
If the cases are done deliberately to protect the thieves, then the law will not be able to take its course. Right. So let's not try to cover up this matter. In any case, we don't have the structures as an opposition to prosecute anyone. The government owns the structures. It is the same system that has
that would be dangerous to imagine the government owns the judiciary. It's supposed to be independent.
It is a government that brought down EACC, which was investigating these people. But if we were to be very genuine, our members have all appeared at the EACC investigation team, and they have answered their charges.
Isn't it an ODM-led bill that also now wants the secretariat thrown out? So you say it's a government that has brought it down, but aren't your members also playing parts to completely now, you know, bring down the EACC? So there's still the secretariat is functioning. Double speak there.
No.
Let's hear from whether. Let's begin with the U.S. and the support.
I think it is appropriate. Let's look at it. Corruption knows no code, no TNA. If we go that way, then we'll travel to Tokyo and the code will start collapsing, or we'll travel to Yatta and it will start collapsing. That support we need. First, we need biometric registration for every Kenyan, so that unusual financial windfall can easily be detected. Somebody today, you see them, before you get into government, you are going on Probox. I'm not saying Probox is bad, but given 6 months, you are V8 and V9 and V10. This can be detected, and this requires a lot of money to do that, and that we need an area support. Secondly, corruption, as Aaron Ngera said, and Patrick Lumumba, professor, it fights back, and it is everywhere. We are lucky that the president himself has taken the fight, and as much as the court side will talk about it, luckily the president, there's nothing you can adduce to him direct. The president, and that is what the country needs, the commitment from the president. So we need that support as a country, and we must resolve, all of us, that we want to fight corruption. It's not about government, it's not about court, it's about all of us, because it is a disease within us. But and corruption is coming up first because of fear, the fear of poverty. That makes us just grab everything. Then there are people who have graduated to greed. They have enough, but there's now one they are greedy. These are societal problems that emanate from the 60s when we got into it. So that support is really, really needed. It's not about blaming who president, who. When the president has come out, it went to parliament, everybody was up in arms. If we were to go back, we have Tokyo. You have to tell us what happened. We are still waiting.
It remains unclear the status of that bill passed by members of parliament that want to have the secretariat thrown out. Is it a proposal you support, in a sense, taking this forward, that is the way to go first? Get the CEO and his deputy out of the way and change the structure in terms of the leadership and the numbers that you see as a commission?
I mean, the party's position has been clear, especially with regards to oversight capacity in Kenya. And we feel that this is an assault on these institutions. I think what is more important than the
Who's leading the assault, sir?
You see, that's the question. You have to separate the party position from individual rogue members of parliament, and this is important because
isn't that convenient when things are not going? You know, to say that now, isn't it a convenient statement for you to make that it's a rogue member, and yet they're your member? No,
but you see, we've been clear on this, and the party leader has been clear on this, and I think it's very clear that we don't support that motion. It's very important to understand that. The trend, I disagree with my friend Bonaweda over here that corruption is a mild thing and it should be treated casually, and because
I have not said that.
If we look at but the impression we get from his body language is that he has a certain casualness towards corruption. We have since 1963 we have never seen anything so rapacious as opposed to previous administrations that you're usually linked with one department. Maybe during the last administration there was the Anglo-leasing scam and probably the maize scandal, and for the previous administration the golden bag scandal. The Auditor General's report right now shows that there's a cross-sectional free-for-all going on right now, which is very difficult to arrest. I mean, even members of the president's own party have displayed concern around this. Now, the most important thing to pay attention to is the reaction towards that. Not the talk. We've had a lot of lovely speeches from this president, but it's one speech too many, because right now it's actually time to deal with these issues. About the partnership with the United States on corruption, the United States deals with its priority areas. It's more concerned about terrorism financing, it's more illicit cash flows into international financial systems and things like that. It's not concerned about the Mama Mboga in Kenya and what corruption does to her. So it's only Kenyans that are going to sort out our corruption problem, and it is important that we prosecute this issue currently. I think it is a bit unfair or illogical to say that because there was corruption in the past that we shouldn't go down the corruption road. The Auditor General's reports coming out every day showing
that Auditor General's report appears to be controversial in the sense that you have it listing 67 billion shillings, but on the other hand it's talking about almost an entire budget, say, of an institution, and of course salaries have been paid, money has been used, so questions like, really, how did that happen?
The Auditor General's report is only controversial to the auditees.
No,
Who nobody else has complained. It's unbelievable that a treasury that is in charge of Kenya's financial system to come up and stand against an auditor general's report, yet the law is clear on the time that they're supposed to submit documentation to support the audit, and if there's a general non-compliance from the whole public administration. So to come after the auditor general has published report and to complain is ridiculous, because he has his constitutional requirements. He has his timelines upon which he has to deliver this documentation to Parliament. If anything, it was 6 months late. So,
right. Yeah, let's hear from Gunjuri. I know you've written a piece about the same.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems you're having right now is this assumption I've seen with Daktari, where you assume that because the Auditor General has said a certain thing, that then it means corruption has been involved. And I'll use a very good example. The Auditor General is saying that we can't find 2.7 billion out of the 3.3 billion that was given to the Attorney General's office. And then what will happen is usually the opposition will take it up and say 2.7 billion shillings has been stolen, the Auditor General's office is corrupt. And that is one of the most dangerous things that's happening to us, because first and foremost, it is not possible for the Auditor General office, for the Attorney General's office to have survived 1 year if 2.7 billion shillings was not found. That's 85% of its annual budget. It's actually not possible. So the first thing what we are having a problem with, and it's a problem we're going to have to sort if we're going to win the war on graft, is that we've now started generalizing certain other issues, including incompetence. You see, he said that we are having a situation where people haven't complied with giving in the reports that were supposed to give. Now, you can't call incompetence corruption, which is what seems to be happening today. So because somebody has been incompetent, then they are corrupt. Because somebody has committed fraud, then they are corrupt. Because somebody has failed to hand in certain documents, then they are corrupt. We need to agree on what corruption actually is if we are going to win this war. But then there's also something I needed to correct, that position that he took. When the president gave 175 names in March, 117 of those names have actually appeared in court at one point or the other. So he can't say that's 2%. But then furthermore to that, this is actually the first government that has done something about corruption, including major corruption, from 1963. And that's something including the coalition government that the court leader right now was Prime Minister and co-principal too. They never did what has been done in the 2 years that this government has been in place. Yeah, so it's important. Yeah. We are not at the point where we can say we have a perfect anti-corruption purge. It's not going to happen soon. However, it is important for the opposition, because the war on graft is something that affects all of us. Part of the problem we are seeing with the opposition is, for example, when, for example, a minister like Ngilu is mentioned as having been involved in corruption, we see the opposition all circle wagons around her because they want to play politics. And it becomes targeting. So it becomes, oh, you see one of the principles of the opposition show up in court with her. Okay. So this is politics, and we need to agree that we are not going to win the war on corruption if we are playing politics.
Let me ask you this, you say on the Auditor General's report, because his argument, the Auditor General himself, has been he's simply the messenger. Yes. So you're saying that there needs to be a definition of what corruption is, so that you don't get then to blanket condemn everybody. But in terms of him releasing this report, there are those who've accused him of malice. Do you agree with that?
I think first and foremost it's interesting how his reports are released. I've been following that they tend to be released nearly immediately every time there's a positive review on the government's. That is my opinion. However, let's also be very clear. The Auditor General never releases a report and says corruption has happened. He never says that.
He just releases the figures.
This is as of now, this is the status of the expenditure by Kenyan government. We had this much money, we can't account, we are not able, as of this moment, as an Auditor General, we are not able to say where this amount of money went. Then immediately, the opposition takes that amount of money and says, this money has been stolen. And remember, like a year ago, or is it a year or 2 years ago, we had a very controversial, sensational headline of how Kenya loses a third of its budget to corruption. But you see, when that issue nobody has ever gone back to actually confirm whether that was true. So we have a lot of sensational headlines that don't have substance.
Okay. Let me bring this to you, Madam Karani. Your thoughts first on whether the opposition really is having meaningful discourse in as far as corruption is concerned, or whether it's really about politics and gaining mileage on each and every issue.
Opposition is doing its work, and it is really, in my view, having meaningful discourse around this corruption issue. The issue is we have never protected anyone. And I really wish...
So explain to us what happened with Ngilu, in your view, and CORD leader Kalonzo Musyoka going there to express support. And remember, it was the opposition that had criticized her, you know, over NLC, saying that she was overstepping her mandate. This issue has been protracted for a long period of time, and you came out to criticize her. So when one of your principals then comes and says, you know, this is our own, how do you reconcile that for Kenyans?
We are not even trying to reconcile anything for Kenyans. Let me ask this question. If Ngilu was sentenced, if she was proved guilty and was sentenced to jail, would Kalonzo have protected her?
Can I ask a question?
No, let me finish my statement. Nobody would have protected her. So,
but he did not wait for judgment or for a decision to be made. He went in court.
I want to answer.
Yeah.
I want to continue answer. But if she was prosecuted and was sentenced for corruption, Kalonzo would not have been able to interfere with the prison warders who would be picking her to take her to prison. So, I still take back the burden to the people who prepared and who even named her name. But what Kalonzo has said, and what whoever has stood around Ngilu has said, has been, why is the burden being given on one person, and we have other people, like for example the Minister of Devolution Waiguru, whose corruption has been all over, in has even been the funds that the allegations that, yes, the allegation corruptions have been higher, and nobody has even dared put her name anywhere. That has been the bone of contention. Nobody has protected an individual because they belong to opposition. In any case, she doesn't belong to the opposition. If we were to be genuine, the narrative and the questions, because the media houses have all these statements, Kalonzo has never ever said that Ngilu is innocent. He has said, can we be seen to be fighting corruption on all fronts? And if CORD was to be blamed for being biased in corruption, then Jubilee should be blamed 1,000,000 times.
No.
So
I wanted to make a comment. I wanted to make a comment. Engineer Kamau, who comes from my neighborhood in Nyeri, was in court. I didn't see Kalonzo. So let's not beat about the bush here, because if it was about Kalonzo, there is politics in this. Why did Kalonzo go for Ngilu's court case and not for Engineer Kamau? They both worked in government at the same time. So what we actually seen is politicization of this of the corruption war.
Okay.
When Kalonzo goes for Ngilu's event, for Ngilu's court case, he's not going for Ngilu's court case so that he can say that we want to ask for equitable. Because if it was equitable, he should have shown up for Engineer Kamau's court case.
All right.
He's playing politics.
Before I come to you, Doctor, let me bring this to whether isn't the government, though, you know, being seen to be pretentious, you know, to maybe say it that way, in as far as on one hand we've heard them say, Madam Karani say that in terms of bringing down the EACC and the commissioners, that was workings of the government behind the scenes. So on one hand, release this list, do all of these things. On the other hand, make sure even if they're out there, there's no action being taken. So is the government lying to Kenyans?
I don't know what we mean by government. The president himself personally took the risk, a big risk, where he sent a list that included several big people in his government. He took it to Parliament and said, gentlemen and ladies, deal with this. No other president has done that in Africa. Then, parliamentarians, realizing now the cookie may be burning, decided to gerrymander over it. Then they fast-tracked a petition that threw out the commissioner. Then you adduce that again to the same president. Then the same parliamentarians decide, we want to whittle down the powers of the commissioners, we make them part-time. Again, you adduce that to government. Which government are we talking about? Unless we are politicizing the president's crusade against corruption. Corruption is a problem, and I want to tell you, it's a big problem that we have to fight, but we should not politicize it. Just like I look at the Auditor General. These auditors, I think, are taking this world for granted. They're actually cheating us. The same auditors told us for many years that KQ is very good. The same auditors told us Uchumi is doing very well. The same auditors told us Mumias is doing very well. Suddenly, it appears they were giving us figures.
So there's one here who's telling you you're not doing very well.
Now, there is one here who's giving us figures that if you look at it basically, take for instance the Attorney General's office, you say all the money that you were given was stolen. Surely you don't need to be a university mathematics professor to see and say this one does not add up.
Doesn't add up.
So even that's why I'm saying these auditors, one minute it is e-pesa, another minute it is e-pesa. They should style up. There's a problem.
Is it the auditors or is it the politicians? Don't even ask the media as we cover these stories. Are we the ones tagging this as corruption? As Munjiri said, the auditor hasn't said it's corruption. He's just said these are the issues I've found.
This is a constitutional office set up by Article 243. And it's one of the few offices remaining that's still doing its job. And it has presented an audit report, and it has said that there's this problem, there are these audit queries. Now, how you handle an audit report is that you say, no, there's no this query, here are the receipts, here's the documentation, here's the paperwork. Now, what happens is that he gives you time to do that. And you're supposed to submit this by September 30th. And he's supposed to submit by the close of September 30th of every financial year. And he's supposed to submit his report by December to Parliament. In fact, what he's doing now, he's submitting a report almost a year, 6 months after he's due to submit the report. So they did have time to comply. They did have time to provide the necessary documentation.
But it appears it's because they complied that they got the clearance certificate. So how is it they have those certificates? Yes? Because most of these institutions have clearance certificates. They have them with them. So how do you get that if questions have not been answered? Because that's the area of concern, that they've been cleared.
Right.
And then how does someone release a report saying that there are still questions? Because you cannot get that unless you've been cleared.
You see, but all we can do is rely on the Auditor General's report. Because he has put the queries on the table and he said that there's a problem in A, B, C, D. Now, what the government should do, instead of holding press conferences every day, is to invite the Auditor General to the office and show him the documentation.
But you get the question I'm asking, isn't it? Isn't it strange that you, on one hand, have a clearance certificate, which means you're good to go, you've been cleared. Right. And on the other hand, there's information saying, oh, there's still questions, which mean you cannot be cleared. So how does that happen?
It's important to understand we don't hold brief for the Auditor General. These are government operations.
I was going to ask for that clarification.
These are government operations.
All right.
And in fact, one of the assertions my friend here has made that that the opposition politicizing and on. You know, the opposition doesn't hold the instruments of government. This is why you run for an election. That you take charge of government, and when you take charge, you take charge. So when Mr. Weda comes in and says that the president took charge, but Parliament is fighting him, they're the majority party in Parliament.
All right, can
you allow me to clarify something?
Wait, the majority in Parliament cannot blame the minority for not being able to.
Because ideally the government will always have its way.
I don't like interrupting, but let me clarify this.
Okay.
This thing of opposition, this is something they are coining. Under the Kenyan Constitution, we have just organs. The people of Kenya give money, Parliament allocates it to executive spends it, and it goes back to Parliament for scrutiny. When we are talking about Parliament, we are talking about everybody. We are not talking about opposition. The Auditor General is supposed to present his report to Parliament. Then Parliament is supposed to put the executive to account. When it comes to deciding in Parliament, you see CORD fervently killing the EACC, then they say it's government, and then when people are not jailed, they say it is government. Yet, with another mouth, they say, look, there must be due process.
Although you realize,
it's amazing, and I really need to clarify this. It's amazing how...
Just a minute, a lot depends on Parliament. They can even they can tell the president, all these have not been explained, no money for you.
Although what I want to say, Nyangati, as you respond, is that on one hand, you argued for example, the EACC bill, that your member was acting as rogue. So then the government could also argue they may have the numbers, but most of these numbers are rogue. But to your point,
it's very interesting that the government shows an amazing efficiency when it wants to pass security laws. They even have a speaker who uses, his body to pass the security laws. Yet, when it comes to taking responsibility for corruption in the country, they say how they are unable to do it. There's a problem with this institution, that institution. When they're trying to achieve something, when they want to clean up Kibera and they send NYS there, they do it with efficiency that you cannot believe. All of a sudden it's in...
Yesterday, the CORD leader Odinga gave an interview to one of the dailies, and one of the things he said finally before he moved to a different subject was that President Obama was misadvised on the situation in Kenya, perhaps did not get a proper brief. He talked about the time they had to spend with the President of the United States, about less than half an hour, and explaining why that was the case. So what brief do you think he got as CORD?
Please allow me to just go back to what we've discussed briefly, because it's a little unfortunate that whenever we are on national media, we always take back the war, even of noble issues in Kenya, back to our tribal and to our political parties' backyard, yet that is a reality. I just want to go back to what Bunjiri and my brother Wedahia talked about, the tribal alignments that corruption has taken. And I want to remind us, because we are in KTN, which covers every situation. In Parliament, the MPs from Nyeri were very alarmed, and they were the ones fighting EACC because of Engineer Kamau's case. Until I remember one MP from Northeastern saying this was tribal. I don't remember the word she used. Now the issue is actually the problem that EACC faced until today was because it prosecuted Engineer Kamau. So if Kalonzo, I feel sad saying this, but if we really want to blame Kalonzo for supporting Gilu from his backyard, then we should also ask the MPs from your village why they were standing so much to defend Kamau, to an extent that they wanted to have EACC's ED be suspended because of that. So let's face that. Now, on the issue of our party leader, he said that he feels that the U.S. president was misadvised or misled. I have always said personally that Jubilee is a PR government. And you think it is capable to mislead the leader of the free world? Let me tell you this. It's not about misleading. Maybe the media, I was not there, so I did not hear his fabulized words. Neither did I record like the media person. I don't know whether he said misled. You know, many times. But in the event he said it, now that it's been reported. Yeah. The issue is that my feeling is this. Even that, let me just tie it to even President going to Parliament to release a list of corrupt people, 100 and something names. It was all PR. And I believe it was the same PR that was applied in trying to give a lot of information about the performance of the government. But I personally don't have a regret about anything that happened with Obama. So Dr. Nagati is saying that President Obama relied on Kenya's government to get a feel of how Kenya is faring.
When you look at the documentation and part of from the joint communique from Parliament, it shows a bit of a more substantive engagement surrounding corruption. They make a couple of commitments, but a lot of it relates to international communities, ethics training, and a lot of very light stuff. Yeah, I think he was well aware. There are other reasons he didn't engage the government more aggressively on that, and I think it primarily has to do with American interests. But I think he did what he could in terms of helping us address this issue and bring it to the forefront. All right. But our friends here took it as a validation that it's a fantastic, an endorsement. It's an endorsement. Yet 2 days later, there's a 67 billion audit query, if you understand what I've said. Yeah, I meant an audit query that has yet to be settled. So
there's a point on that. I think those who advise the CORD leader do not seem to understand the world, and that is why they got it wrong. President Obama is ruling America, leading America through executive orders. Why? Because it has an opposition in the name of Republicans called see no good, hear no good, see nothing good in his administration. That is the background from which he's coming. Now, if then comes to Kenya and he meets a similar opposition, psychologically he will not give them a hearing. That is where they found themselves. He saw Raila Odinga and his team, and he actually saw the Republicans. and he brushed them aside.
Let him, then I'll come to you.
I think, first and foremost, my personal opinion about the comments from the CORD leadership is that they're sulking, they're upset. They always, you see, for a long time, including at the period when I was working with them, for a long time, there was always a perception that Barack Obama is closer to the opposition than he is to the government side in our country. And they haven't recovered from the fact that he came here for 3 days and met them for 30 minutes. And he met them at a time when it was actually no longer essential to meet them. And let me explain what I mean. Anybody who's followed Obama's travels knows that he first meets everybody he needs to meet, who he believes is going to speak into the final statement that he's going to make to the public. His final engagement, his final official engagement, was a speech he made at Nyayo State, at Kasarani. If he meets you after that, he's just been polite. What your meeting is not going to speak into what he was doing in this country, and that's what the opposition is feeling. This guy, man, we've owned him. He's our brother. He's our cousin. 2 weeks ago we were here talking about it, and you could feel the way this guy is ours. And he comes here and he meets them for 30 minutes.
I think
they're hurting, and they're being very unreasonable in their reactions.
Our friends in our opposing party are doing reducing very serious issues of national governance to the optics of a meeting. And I mean, there have been statements even from your leader of majority in parliament talking about the same thing and calling CORD lots of names. What is important is the overall trajectory of our democracy. We're a nascent country. We're a fledgling democracy. We're trying to build a country over here. Now, the reason this is important is that in a republican system like ours, all these institutions are created to create checks and balances in government, so that the idea is that they're competing institutions. It's called Jeffersonian democracy. It's competing institutions that check each other and lead to a generally freer and whatever. Now, what is happening here is that it's 1963 all over again. The progressive, within 2 years, the progressive destruction of these institutions. Now, these institutions are very important. I know my friend over there, Weda, is shaking his head, but the initiative for the destruction of these institutions has come from the executive. It's not coming from anywhere else. It has come from the executive. The breakdown, the hounding out of the Mumu Matemu and his vice chair and Jane Osongo came from the executive. They had meetings, people were invited to State House, and they were promised different kind of jobs, ambassadorial jobs, to leave office. And this is coming less than a month after you've stood in Parliament, given us a grand speech on how you're trying to fight corruption. Right. just to finish this point. And if so, it's a critical issue. It's the defining issue of our time. So I know Weda can reduce it down to a visit to Obama and how Republicans say no, and Obama doesn't govern by executive order, but they have a developed democracy. We don't.
Okay. Yeah? Let's shift gears, talk about KQ, and it's not actually more than turbulent times. It's going through 25.7 billion loss announced last week, and several statements have since been made. Opposition says audit KQ by an international firm and audit the auditors because they've been giving it a clean bill of health so far. So I'm keen to hear, and I'll start with you, Karani, on this, because the biggest question is, did this just occur even to the people leading the national carrier, that they're doing this badly all of a sudden?
You know, that just explains why we should not try to compartmentalize this issue of corruption. We were just discussing a while ago about the Auditor General report. Yes, there are queries, but if we now say queries should be separated from corruption, we are only trying to talk about a serious problem in this country. I have had everybody complain about the KQ problem. It could not have happened. 26 billion could not have been lost in a span of 1 year. That has certainly been a progressive, so to speak, a progressive robbery of public funds. And there has been a KPMG which has been auditing this farm and giving and validating it all this while, just like Weda spoke about some farms being validated, and you even talked about some being given certificate, free clearance certificate, and then later on we hear queries. We need to be very serious in this country. We really need to be tired. We actually need to say enough is enough. The KQ problem is so serious. Look at the way KQ has been buying new big jets. They have been creating routes, one of which is Vietnam. And if we were to ask ourselves today, how many Kenyans go to Vietnam? And how much business do we get from Vietnam? What has been the reason? Let us look at the procurement processes of KQ. KQ buy most of its products from Kenya. But if you check today, KQ does not buy from manufacturers. And I have never understood why public organs do not buy products directly from manufacturers. We have a company that produces tissue paper. Why do we have to go and buy, for heaven's sake, from a distributor and another business person to create business for Kenyans? Why not just make order from the manufacturer?
For you, it's the leaders, the heads at KQ.
It's not the leaders. Let me tell you my conviction. The KQ problem goes beyond the management. I believe, let us look at today. The shares of KQ have drastically reduced. I think they are selling at 4 shillings or 5 shillings. But as we speak today, there is 1, 2, or 3 Kenyans who are aggressively buying these shares. Why don't we interrogate? Why are they buying these shares?
Doesn't that usually happen, that there are people in an industry who will understand that yes, things may be bad now, but they will recover naturally, will go into buy?
That is not true.
There's nothing like a natural recovery.
Okay, that's not natural
this
recovery.
Is, a business has got different dynamics. It has an industry standards and competitive forces. From what KQ has done in terms of its strategy, completely from its fuel hedging and Project Mawingo, which was to expand its fleet. I think they've done 43 to 52 planes right now. It showed an aggressive expansion, exactly what happened with the Chumi, an aggressive expansion during declining revenues, which looks like a simple competency issue, but in Kenya, competency is always close to competence and corruption are very close bedfellows. Yeah, and as opposed to what my friend says, that we should break up to describe what is incompetency and what is corruption. A lot of it is very clear and deliberate. KQ has progressively written down the value of which has blown up its books. In fact, it's a cumulative pre-tax loss now of I think 45 billion shillings. And we've had audit firms go through the books over the past since 2011 when they announced this fantastic strategy and how we are going to expand to different markets and all. So from those auditors' interrogation of those books, they should have caught those losses by now. It's exactly what happened with Arthur Anderson and Enron in the US, where people hid a lot of stuff in the books, you know. And with the government shareholding in KQ and being a very what do you call it, and being a private company and that should have the public interest at heart, a lot of these issues should have been interrogated earlier. If you look at the KQ contracts, especially surrounding the leasing of airplanes, there are parties in foreign countries that are acting as brokers, which is a very common way of making money in Kenya in terms of corruption. If you look at the fuel hedging strategy, they are also doing it.
This is corruption that's been peddled by?
This is exactly Mumias.
Okay.
It is the same scenario where there's a government shareholding and government condones and allows. It creates the same corporate culture. In fact, if I'm not wrong, the Transparency International Index on the corporate governance surrounding, corporate governance in Kenya, scored Kenya as one of the poorest, most corrupt countries.
Okay.
If anything, in the mining report, we are third last in the world in terms of doing business in extractive industry integrity.
Yes.
First and foremost, I think everybody is agreeing, both Jubilee and opposition, that KQ needs to get looked at deeply. I have a couple of comments. First and foremost, the fact that we are now challenging the KPMG audit that they have done in the past means that I don't understand why the opposition assumes that the Auditor General's report cannot be challenged. Because if you can challenge the KPMG report on KQ, why can't you challenge the Auditor General's report on government? One. Number two, Because I mean these are audits. It's an audit process.
Okay.
It's an audit process. The fact that you work for government. No, the fact that you work for government and one is a private sector.
All right.
So that's the first point. The second point, I also believe we are forgetting to appreciate the fact that KQ is a business. Government owns shares into it. KLM owns shares, and a couple of other Kenyans own shares. Why do I say this? KQ is a business that depends a lot on tourism. We have already admitted as a country that our tourism industry has been hit terribly by insecurity. Hotels are making losses at the coast. The hotel industry, the tourism industry in Kenya has made significant losses. Why is it so difficult for us to appreciate the fact that the carrier that depends on tourism is going to actually make losses? So I feel...
Does the carrier depend on tourism, really?
A lot of that. I mean, a lot of the
you have the connectivity flights, yes, happening and business, but you also have these other routes. That's why the issue was you procure Dreamliners, which are to do this far-flung sort of route, which then would bring in that kind of money, but then you get them before you have those routes approved. So in terms of the bulk of the money, it is from, apparently, it appears from some of the analysts, it is poor decisions at management level. There was poor decisions at management level, but then part of the problem, and he said, KQ got into a very aggressive expansion plan. A lot of the decision of that expansion plan was based on trying to project a growing. When you start looking for routes, you're assuming that you're going to get how do you call it? Like a sponge of business, and then at the same time, because I mean we are all in business.
There's no business
at level or but because people forget, I also run a business. Yeah. Some of the decisions you make, you will make decisions that lead you into losses, which is I'm talking about competence or even just the business environment in which you're living in. You have things that you can control, there are things you cannot control. What we need to do with KQ before we start shooting down people is we need to actually first go back and understand the decision-making process of KQ. Audit the process. How did we get here? Let's also appreciate the fact that businesses will make losses and businesses are going to make profits. Okay. That's just the way the world goes.
Let's listen from Weda, then I'll come back to you.
Yes. I think KQ has had problems with the insecurity in this country. The travel adversaries have a percentage contribution. Secondly, corruption also has a contribution. Then thirdly, there is the gerrymandering in management, where things look rosy, and then people are celebrated, then they leave office, then it explodes. The Momias, you can see when some people are leading this institution, they were doing very well. When things come up later, it is like things were very bad. I recall about 3 years ago, I wanted to invest in shares of that institution, Kenya Airways, and somebody told me this is a bomb waiting to happen. Don't put your money there. He didn't give me any statistics, he didn't. But out of those rumors, I stepped back. So it is an endemic problem which has been running for very long. And it is a part of those three things. It's those three things that we said. But going forward, I think we'll have to bail out KQ.
Do we bail out, Dr.?
We lend. It's not bailing out. Bailing out is a opposition talk. It is actually lending more money, which will be repaid. Government will get more shares, and actually for Kenyans, this is the time. If I had money, if I was a sugar baron, today is the time I would have put in more money in terms of shares, because they say that you buy when blood is flowing in the streets.
Or do you then reverse from privatization, take it back to government? Is that also a possible
Can I say something?
No. Sorry,
that would send a terrible message to the private sector. Nationalization is a concept that exists, and it has been overtaken by its time. I think when it comes to the government bailout, which is an impending bailout, it's going to happen. KQ has an asset value, if I'm not wrong, of about 300 billion shillings. And a debt portfolio of 150 billion shillings, which has been extended right now by an extra 20 billion shillings from the Afri Exim Bank in Cairo. They're borrowing this money to help this out. And they say they're going to sell, I think, 7 old planes, if I'm not wrong, to plug in the difference. But part of KQ's problem is not is not, there's a concept of moral hazard where the management knows something that the people don't know. Part of KQ's problem is not the debt portfolio. If we start putting our money in KQ now as a government, trying to help KQ stand up, it won't be long before you have to save KQ entirely. There's no change in corporate culture, there's no change in best practices, there's no change in strategy.
Yeah.
Because even with the loan they've taken from the African Exim Bank, we have another layout
of how that money will
be spent.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there has been a historical economic manipulation in Kenya. The elites, most of whom oftentimes have been in government or next to the government, have always worked with managements to bring down institutions with an intention of either buying the institutions or selling these institutions to partners that they have chosen. We have seen them from 1963. We are seeing the same problem happening with KCC, which was a farmers' cooperative society. Today, KCC has been progressively brought down because someone wants to buy out KCC and own the industry of milk. And this has always been either a family or an individual. We saw that in many years ago in other companies in this country, some of which included the textile industry. What is happening in Mumias and what is happening in KQ and what has happened in many other, those days we used to call them parastatals, today we call them corporations, has been the same trend. There are elites in this country who desire to control this nation, and they work very systematically with management. They buy shares, they appoint themselves into board, they are controlling these companies oftentimes subtly or privately. And they want these companies to collapse so that they buy them out, and because they are desperate to control Kenya and to control the economy of this country. How I wish the Kenyan population, the Kenyan people would overcome these tribal political barriers and decide that enough is enough for our nation. Because we are all paying taxes. And the story of KQ is not different.
Yeah, because if you, the media has been accused of intellectual incuriosity, where you don't prosecute a case to its end. To support her argument, I would urge the media to go and interrogate who are leasing those leasing companies for the Boeings in Dubai. Go see yourself.
Okay. Investigate somebody called the Twiga. Investigate companies called Samburu. Investigate companies who lease planes. Sorry, Nyangazi for cutting me. Who lease planes to KQ.
So the media
tell us
do this.
Tell us the directors of these companies. If we will not find them in the elite system of this country, some of whom my brother here, Weda, and Ngujiri are trying to protect. If you notice, since we came here, maybe they don't even know because they are Kenyans. I don't think they are the billionaires. But I want to you, my brothers, they don't know. Maybe they don't know.
Just a minute, please.
Let's wake up and refuse this corruption in this country.
So we have this thing of talking about elites like they belong to one side of the political divide.
I didn't say
when we speak, because when we speak about people trying to take over industries, I know other people who are trying to take over the energy industry, and they're basically squeezing competition out of the way. I think first and foremost, there are certain things we need to appreciate. We are a capitalist country, so we're going to have a class of this society that is going to go out there to try and take over as much business as they can. Now, what we need to do as a political establishment, we expect from political establishment is a certain element of balance. And then we also need to stop sensationalizing issues. If something is going wrong, deal with that thing. Don't expand it into some political benefit or some ethnic benefit.
Okay.
That for me is my problem.
I think what Madam is saying is a rumor speaks from the streets that we bring it down, you buy it. KQ is not a kiosk which you can buy easily when it goes down. In fact, the day it goes down, no serious businessman would want to go in there. That is why nobody is buying Uchumi when it goes down, because of the dynamics of business. You buy shares, let me explain to you, because you look at certain risk factors. You know very well that a national carrier somehow has access to credit. Well, the first stop is government. They will bail it out. So if you are a prudent business, you and me and him, please, this is the time to buy. But if you fear risk, then what we are saying is that...
But you feared when your friend proposed that you buy...
Yes.
No, it was to decide at what price. Now it has happened. If I had money today, I would be at the exchange tomorrow, buying. But what I'm saying is that we have issues with some of this, like KQ. We must stem out corruption. Then we also must appreciate where we went wrong. But as a country, if we deal with the corruption without politicizing it, saying, I wish they could find President Uhuru with one share in KQ today, they would have, opposition would be demonstrating how it should be. But luckily, so we are saying, we are saying, let us not politicize the question of fighting corruption. This is a problem across the board.
This is the same simplicity and obfuscation that Jubilee bring to every serious national issue. We are talking about a 300 billion shilling asset value here, and half of it belongs to the people of Kenya, and the other half belongs to a couple of corporate investments. To talk about it, in fact, I would advise your viewers at home, if you really want to waste your money, take Weda's advice and buy KQ shares.
What if it bounces back?
It had gone down.
Businesses don't bounce back by chance. Business bounce back by deliberate action.
And so what if that happens here on out?
But where is that deliberate action that leads to that bouncing back?
I don't know why we are trying to be prophets here. I don't know at what point we are assuming that we cannot fix KQ. I don't know why we are assuming it cannot be fixed.
Done deal.
What do you mean it's a done deal?
We don't say it's a done deal.
It had been in that position before.
No, we say that there's some steps that need to be taken, and especially surrounding the corporate culture and the government association with KQ, and the conflict
be taken?
And conflict of interest, which is really important.
Can it be done?
Because
can it be done?
Can it be done?
Let me make the argument that the person you're expecting to prosecute the conflict of interest is the person engaged in the conflict of interest. So tell me how that will be done.
But you see, no. We are saying we've just learned about the losses that they've made. We are assuming you guys are going to make so much noise that you're actually going to fix that problem. Because as you said, opposition is in the business of being opposition. So we are going to assume that you guys are going to, because you're going to raise these issues and we're going to fix it. I
want us in less than a minute, each of you, to say whether you think there should be reviews on this particular bill, that's the KDF bill, because some of the proposals in it are to remove the role of oversight of Parliament completely. There's no compensation of officers that are injured or die while on duty, and the president can extend the term of the chiefs by at most 1 year. So briefly, you agree with this or you don't? We have 2 minutes to wind up, so don't take it.
Of course we don't agree with it, especially surrounding, most importantly, the compensation of families. I think if you send someone to war, you have an obligation to compensate his family if he loses his life in war. Secondly, if the removal of the oversight capacity around surrounding KDF, after a history with security contracts, especially Anglo-leasing, I think it would be an extremely bad idea to remove all of this surrounding KDF. It's important to realize that even even in the US, they have a Senate Intelligence Committee that prosecutes issues surrounding oversight. So it's possible to have parliamentary oversight still in a confidential manner within
briefly.
Parliamentary oversight is a constitutional mandate. To limit it even by a comma requires constitutional amendment. They should take that into account. But compensation, if you are being hired as a soldier, there is inherent risk that you will go to war. So I think compensation should be fixed, not left. With regard to what else?
Term limits.
Term limits, I think the president should have power to occasionally extend, because it depends with the circumstances. Sometimes the country can be at war, and that is the time the commander-in-chief or whoever is supposed to leave. It would be prudent that at that time, depending on circumstances, to extend. So that should also be incorporated.
Last word.
The world is moving towards transparency and increasing democratic space. But this security bill is taking us way beyond authoritarian space. In fact, it's going to the primitive stages where nobody had even gone to school. So it cannot even gain any breath space in this country.
All right.
I think we need to look at this from two dimensions. First, I don't agree with the lack of compensation. I think I agree with everybody's sentiments here. If you're going to send somebody to war, you do need to compensate them for any losses. However, on the flip side, we also need to agree that our security situations and challenges are changing. Because, for example, one of the things I know people are challenging is whether the KDF can actually be deployed in country. And we are already at a situation where we are seeing wars being fought in country, whether it's in Garissa, whether it is in various places. So there will need to be changes to a lot of our security bills moving forward, because our security challenges are also changing.
All right, and that is the way it is. My guests saying it as they see it. Ambrose Weda, who's a lawyer, Ogla Karani, who's treasurer at the ODM, and Mudiri Wambogo, political commentator, and Dr. Paul Nyangati, who's called political consultant. We thank you for joining us. Right. And we'll take a short break. When we return, Michael Gitonga will be taking over, and he'll be talking with a recovered drug addict who's not just been able to pull himself out of that tight spot he had in a long time in his life, but has also been mentoring young people, and you'll get to see also one of his mentees that he's come with to studio this morning. Also, that breaking story you've been seeing scrolling at the bottom end of your screen will bring you more details as we get them.